Hello and welcome to our horse chat. This is our final one for the month. Thank you for all who can join us. We're excited to be speaking with Meg Puckett from the Corolla Horse Fund, and we're excited to hear more about their work. This is Charlene Couch, Dr. Charlene Couch. She works with us at the Livestock Conservancy. Charlene, if you want to give brief introductions.
Yeah, hey, I'm Charlene. I don't often go by doctor, so please forget that part. I do a lot of the communication work with the horse folks, and I am always eager to learn. And one of the things I'd really like to learn about today are the Corolla horses. Meg Puckett is with us from the Corolla Wild Horse Fund, and she is going to talk about this colonial Spanish group of horses. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah. So Emily Rose, I think you need to play our promotional video. Thanks to ManaPro, they have done a lot to help us put these horse chats out in front of everyone. And I hope everybody can just sit still and look at all these pretty pictures of heritage breeds, and we'll be right back.
Champions, colleagues,
roommates,
and personal trainers.
Whatever role they play,
they're an important part of our lives.
In their quiet way,
and their not so quiet way.
They keep us young.
On our feet,
on the go.
They pull us back to nature
and push us toward the next adventure.
And as much as we count on them,
they count on us all the more.
To nurture their lives
with the same commitment.
To protecting them,
helping them grow
and thrive.
Treating them
as well as they treat us. By giving them a little more of our lives. Because no matter what role they play, out here
or in here,
we're here to make their lives the best they can be.
ManaPro, nurturing life.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. Welcome to Horse Chats. These happen every July. On Facebook, and then they are recorded by Emily Rose and released as a podcast and YouTube video later. So even if you're missing it now, you can tune in later. With us today is Meg Puckett, and she is the herd manager out on the Outer Banks of North Carolina of the Corolla Wild Horse Herd. Before we even get started very far, Meg, where is Corolla?
Corolla is at the edge of the world. So we are on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which actually span from the Virginia state line all the way down to the South Carolina state line, basically. But Corolla is all the way at the top. So where the horses live in Corolla is the northernmost part of the Outer Banks. They have about 7,600 acres, and it stretches from about the town of Corolla all the way up to False Cape State Park in Virginia. So that's where they are. That's where our horses live.
All right. Well, tell me, how did you come to be managing a herd of wild horses in North Carolina?
I think if you ask anybody who's known me my whole life, they would say, well, of course she did. What else is she going to do? So, I grew up in this area. These horses, I've pretty much, either ridden horses or been around horses for most of my life. But these horses, these wild horses were really some of the first ones that I was ever exposed to as a child. And so they've always been really, really special to me. I always say that when I was a kid, I didn't have posters of boy bands hanging on my walls. I had pictures of the wild horses hanging on my walls. And I still have some of them, and so they've always been very, very special to me. I grew up, went to college. I got degrees in history and English. And I worked in history museums for some time. And then I was at the Virginia Zoo in Norfolk for some years, and then decided that it was time to move home to the Outer Banks. And so I came back down here, and it just kind of happened to be the right place at the right time. Our former director, Karen McAlpin, emailed me out of the blue one day and said, "Where are you? I need a herd manager." And I said, well, wow, that's perfect. And so we got together and had dinner and chatted. And it was never a question that I was going to not accept the job when she offered it to me. And so, she gave me the opportunity to start with the fund, and it's kind of been history ever since. So.
Wow. So how long have you been there again?
6 years. So
6 years.
this is my 7th summer. we tend to measure our lives in summer seasons, but yeah, 6 years.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Corolla is certainly a vacation destination, and the Outer Banks are as well. Lots of people from all over the United States come to the North Carolina Outer Banks. What would you like folks to know about this particular horse herd and maybe some of their history? What makes them so fascinating and so important?
Yeah, well, I mean, these horses, as anyone who's familiar with rare breeds and heritage breeds, these horses were some of the first ones that were ever brought back to North America and South America too. So they're very much the foundation for so many other American horse breeds, and also just our history in general. The history of these horses on the Outer Banks is very much the history of the people of the Outer Banks too. And so just culturally, they're so important. It's their history here. You study the horse's history, and it really tells you a lot about the people and the place and everything, and sort of the evolution of this area. So they're very much intertwined with that history as well, And then from a breed standpoint, a biological standpoint, they're very important because they're a critically endangered breed. There's not that many of them left. We only have a couple hundred of them left in the wild. And so it's just so very important for people to understand that history and that importance and that background, and understand why it's so important to protect them as they exist in the wild still, and also protect their habitat and where they live. And there's a lot of challenges that go along with that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's really difficult to manage a wild horse population with, that people really want to come see,
Right. Yeah, they very much are a tourist draw. And so a lot of times, managing wildlife, managing an endangered breed, and then having to deal with that kind of exposure don't go hand in hand. There's sometimes you can't manage the way that you want to manage because of some of those environmental factors that you have to deal with too. So it can be really challenging. And then like you said, you've got all of these people who want to come see them, and you don't want to discourage that. We want people to come see these horses. We want them to experience them in their natural habitat where they've lived for 600 years, and there's nowhere else like it besides Shackleford that you can come and see this. And so, we have to find that balance between keeping them here, keeping them wild, keeping them in a place where people can come and see them, but then also protecting them and protecting their habitat.
Yeah. So if I am a tourist going to the Outer Banks, which actually I am tomorrow, and I wanted to see the horses, what are some tips for me to be sure that my behavior helps the conservation of this herd?
Sure. Yeah. So, if people really, really want to get out to the beach and see the horses this time of year, we highly recommend taking a tour to go see them. There are commercial tour companies that the Corolla Wild Horse Fund works really closely with. We do education for their drivers. I maintain, weekly reports and emails and things like that to them throughout the summer. And so their guides are very knowledgeable. They know where to go to find the horses, and they can give people a background on the horses. And it gives people an opportunity to see them, in a natural way, but in a very safe way too. And it also saves wear and tear on your vehicle, quite frankly. If somebody wanted to go out and see the horses on their own, they definitely need to do some reading first. We always encourage people do a little bit of research before you decide to hit the beach, because there's a lot that people need to know. And so, go to the Currituck County website, learn all the rules and regulations for beach driving and all of that before you go out there. And then if you do go see the horses, just remember to give them space. It's really pretty simple. It's the law is to stay 50 feet away from them. And if you do that, you're golden. You're not going to feed them. You're not going to get too close. You're not going to get kicked. You're not going to, disturb them with what they're doing. You just stay far enough away from them and watch them behave naturally. And it's better than watching TV, when you just sit back and watch them interact with each other and see those herd dynamics and everything. There's just nothing like it.
Wow. That sounds wonderful.
It is. Yeah. It never gets old.
Yeah,
Never.
I'm sure. You guys are, so this population of horses is probably 400 or 500 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They're all on an island, right? So nobody comes in terms of breeding, and nobody goes out. How do you manage a small population like that when, genetic diversity is an issue?
Sure. Yeah, it's tricky. And so we started when the pandemic started, we kind of took that as an opportunity to sort of take a step back and kind of look at a lot of those questions, honestly. We started thinking about DNA and genetics and what do we really know about these horses that's not anecdotal, that we don't just observe. And so, a lot of that work was started decades ago. There have been people since the fund existed who have been kind of working towards that better understanding of the DNA and the science behind it and everything. And so we decided, we've got time, we can't do anything else except sit at home, so let's take it and run with it. And we also, it was really nice, we kind of had the beach to ourselves for a couple months, and so we could go out with a dart gun and actually start darting horses and collecting some of that DNA, which was nice. And so that's kind of first and foremost is like, let's figure out, let's learn everything we can about these horses. What is the level of inbreeding? What breeds are we seeing represented in that ancestral breed, makeup? Do we have genetic issues in the herd? Do we have areas where genetic diversity is not great? Like, let's start gathering that data and then see where we are, because that's going to help us make more purposeful decisions when it comes to breed management. And so like a good example of that is as we've collected some DNA, we identified a certain family of horses that all tended to have eye issues. And, is it genetic? Is it just a coincidence? Who knows? And so we identified 5 or 6 of them and sent them off to be tested for ocular issues. And turns out none of them had any genetic issues. It was all just happened to be with these horses, even though they're related, it was just all a coincidence, which is a good thing. But if it had come back that there was a genetic issue, then we could start to maybe manage the breeding. We could say, all right, we don't want this passed down. And so we can contracept mares that we know might, that carry this genetic issue. Or we could decide, it's worth it to us to deal with eye issues and continue to let these mares breed. And so it just gives us some more sort of tools and resources and knowledge when it comes to being a little more purposeful about breeding. We have introduced a Shackelford stallion to the herd. We've got protocols in place for that, for genetic diversity. And so as we learn more about the wild herd, we can maybe target areas where we know we do have low genetic diversity. Say in this one area, all of these horses are related. Well, if we're going to bring Shackelford mares over, let's put them there. It's not a guarantee, but it kind of helps us sort of, give them the best chance that they have.
Yeah, closed populations are sometimes really tough to manage for their genetic health.
It's tricky, but the nice thing, you can say with this herd, if we were seeing major cases of inbreeding and genetic issues, they wouldn't still be here. The one of the unique things about these horses is that over 500-600 years, no one ever brought domestic horses in on purpose to improve the breed. They've pretty much existed as they exist for centuries, and so now, but as they lose territory, as the herd does, start to shrink, then that's when it is up to us to kind of step in and help them as best we can.
That's right. Yeah. So you have the management of the wild herds. I guess, is it a herd, or would you call it multiple herds because it's different bands of horses?
Yeah, we call it just the one herd. So we've got around 104 horses overall in the herd. And then, like you said, they kind of break down into family groups, but it's just one herd.
Okay. So you're doing the wild part, but I've seen on your website that sometimes horses come in for different issues, and you're able to, do you have facilities to treat them or to handle them?
Yeah, so the Wild Horse Fund, over the years, we've always kind of had a rescue side of things. I mean, it's inevitable that you're going to have horses that need to be removed for medical reasons, or sometimes, behavioral, habitual issues, things like that. And so that's not really anything new for the fund. But over the last couple of years, we've really been able to establish our rescue farm, we call it. It's more like a sanctuary at this point. The fund was very lucky to be able to purchase this property in 2018. So, now we have a permanent 30 acres that we have that can house any of these horses that come off, which has just been, it's just been wonderful to know that, if they need to stay here the rest of their lives, they can. If they're suitable for adoption and we can find new homes for them, then that's great too, but at the end of the day, we have a safe place to bring these horses. And so, yeah, and some of that hopefully in the near future will focus on captive breeding. That is part of our sort of long-term goal is to potentially start producing foals, not a ton, but potentially produce some foals here on the farm too.
Mm-hmm. And that would be so that you could control who mates with whom, so that you could increase particular bloodlines, maybe, or family lines.
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
For all the viewers, as a quick reminder, you can leave us questions as well if you had it. We forgot to say that at the beginning, but since this is live, we will see your questions. So please send them in as we continue to talk.
Mm-hmm. And the other nice thing about this farm too is that it serves as an education center for the public. We've since we purchased it, we've been able to open it up to the public and have weekly events out here where people can come and talk to us and also interact with these horses in a safe way, and learn more about them too. So it's really become a great resource for education as well.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Mm-hmm.
So a minute ago, you mentioned something about DNA, mm-hmm. and you mentioned something about contraception. How on earth do you do that when you have wild horses running around on 7,000 acres?
Dart gun.
Dart gun, okay.
Dart gun, yeah. Dart gun is your best friend when you're having to administer anything to a wild horse. So, yeah. So we use a dart gun. We'll use it for the contraception, and then also in the rare case that we need to sedate a wild horse, if we're needing to catch it for some reason, we can use it for that as well.
Well, so how are your marksmanship skills then?
The gun has a scope on it, and so they're pretty good. It doesn't take that much skill. You got the little red dot, and and you're hitting a horse's hips, so it's not too difficult. But it definitely can be stressful because you have a moving target, and especially with the contraception, those mares know exactly what you're doing. They recognize the gun, they know that they're about to get darted. And so we have some that are pretty good at running away from you when they see you coming at you with the gun, at them with the gun. So, it can be a little bit of a challenge. And then again, we're surrounded by people, so that can make it really challenging too. We collect DNA the same way with the darts. So you have to be really careful when you're out there firing darts when there's 100,000 people on the beach too. So,
gosh, yeah, I didn't really think about that piece of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
When there's a separate training that you guys send most of your volunteers for the dart training, I read something about you have a training for that. Who attends that?
So whoever is going to be mixing the drug has to attend it. Mm-hmm. And so right now I'm the one that's certified to do that for the Wild Horse Fund. And that's at the Science and Conservation Center at Zoo, Montana. So you have to go through and be certified to be able to mix the drug. And it's a great tool for breed management with these wild horses, for us, but really for wild horses anywhere. It's really non-invasive, it's non-hormonal, it's reversible, and it's very safe to use. So it's a great resource for anyone who's managing herds of wild horses.
Yeah. For folks who don't think about this all the time, why would you, if these horses are rare, why would you want to prevent one from breeding? I mean, other than the ocular issues you mentioned.
No, absolutely. And that goes back to, what I was saying earlier about having to balance, you're trying to save an endangered breed. At the same time, you're having to deal with a lot of other aspects of, where they live and the people around them and the entities that are involved in sort of the horses day to day. And so the Wild Horse Fund does not exist in a vacuum. We work in conjunction with the state, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and then also our county here as well. And we have an advisory board that meets regularly. We have a management agreement. And so, as you can imagine, there were different opinions about herd size over the years. Because free roaming horses are considered by the federal government to be invasive and non-native. And so the fund worked really, really hard for about 20 years to get this agreement in place and, work with these different organizations and government entities to come up with a plan that's best for the horses, but then also best for the environment and best for the area, Right. And so in the last couple of years, we have finally been able to sign that agreement, that population statement in our agreement. And that now says that we should have no less than 110 and no more than 130 horses. And that's a big deal. Prior to that, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife especially, said 50, 60 max, and we know that that's not a viable number, genetically, that wouldn't, the horses would not last very long. But through the work of so many people over the last 2 decades and coming and saying, look, we want to manage these horses in a responsible way. We know that there's a number for genetic viability that's important, but then there's probably also a number for just environmental health that's important. And those numbers might not line up with each other, and we're going to have to deal with that if that happens, but in the meantime, what we can do is, like I said, we learn as much as we can about these horses. We learn where they're going, what they're doing, what they're eating, how they're interacting with their environment, with the native wildlife and all of that, and then work really closely with these other entities to say, what are you seeing? Are you seeing the same things that you're seeing? And so, because of that work over the years, we've now reached that agreement with them. And so that's why it's a long way to get back to that, but that's why there's a limit to the herd, and that's in our management agreement, and we have to follow that. Mm-hmm. But right now, like I said, we're at about 104. We need to do a census. We keep track of every individual horse pretty much every day that we see them. But it's about time to go and do our summer census, but we're at about 104. So we've got room to grow, luckily. Yeah.
When we have a question from the audience, Sherry asked, does the contraception just wear off?
It does, yes. So it lasts about a year. If there's a mare that we really, really, really don't want to get pregnant for whatever reason, which quite frankly right now there are none in the herd that we're that worried about. But if there was for some reason, we would probably contracept her again at about 10 months just to be on the safe side. But it does last for a year and then it wears off completely.
Well, and I think that brings us to another question. So you talked about, as tourists, are there things that if you're visiting, what can you do to be informed when you come? But if you want to volunteer, how can you get involved? Like, what are the opportunities that you guys have for volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we are very much a grassroots organization, and so depending on what someone comes to us with their skills, with what they're interested in, we can usually find something for them to do, anything from helping out in the office with mailers and, things like that, that I think a lot of people probably don't think about when you're thinking about managing a herd of wild horses, but there's a lot of administrative work that goes into that too. We have memberships and donations and horse sponsorships and all that kind of stuff. So they can always use that kind of work. If somebody, comes to us and says, hey, I do graphic design, like, great, we would love to have you, so special skill sets like that are always very much appreciated. And then here at the rescue farm, if somebody was interested in coming and helping, with that kind of day-to-day work, there's always stalls to clean. We're not stalls. We don't really stall the horses, but, run-in sheds to clean and troughs to scrub and all that good stuff. We certainly welcome volunteers as they come along.
How many volunteers do you have?
Right now, let's see. Well, we have a 4-H group. We have a great group of young people that meet out here pretty regularly, and they are just phenomenal. They help us with our special events every week. They help us with training the horses and working the horses and things like that. We have about 3 volunteers that are out at the farm pretty regularly, and then over on the other side of things, we have, I'd probably say about 15, 20 volunteers. We have we work with people in the neighborhoods that live up where the horses are, and so those are all considered volunteers too. If we have an issue that I can't get to it right away, I'll text them and say, hey, can one of you guys go check this out? We have a group that's a great group of people who help us move horses back to the 4x4 area when they escape every once in a while. We do have horses that circumvent the fence every once in a while, so I've got people that help with that. So there's just all kinds of things that people can help with if they come to us and ask.
Yeah. Check out the Corolla Wild Horse Fund website if you haven't already. It is beautiful for one thing, and it's full of so much information about the history and what the horses are like, and lots and lots of beautiful photos.
Thank you.
Yeah. Something else I found while I was poking around the other day is a film, a movie that someone has made about this group. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Jerry Thompson's film, The Secret of Corolla. That one?
I think so.
Yeah, it came out in the last year or so. Yeah. Jerry came to us a couple years ago, and just the nicest guy, just very, very interested in the horses, and came to visit and was just struck by the natural beauty and everything that everyone's always struck by when you see them, and approached us about doing this documentary, and it was just fabulous to work with, and so he that came out in the last year or so. Yeah, it's fabulous. I've probably seen it 15, 20 times. And every time I watch it, I just cry through the whole thing because it's just so moving. It's just so well done. Yeah.
I bet the horses too, right? The ones.
Yep. It's kind of surreal to watch it and go, oh, there's so-and-so and there's so-and-so. And you still get excited. You see him on TV and it's like, oh my gosh, there's Joaquin. And he's in there, I was there when he was filming it, but it's just, it's cool. It's like being friends with movie stars kind of.
Oh, right. That's neat. Yeah. So folks, if you're interested in seeing the trailer, or I'm not sure how you can watch the entire film, or if you can yet, is that?
Yeah, you can. Yep. You can order the DVD from us on our website. And then you also can download it. So there's a digital version. So if somebody goes to our website, they can actually just download it and watch it right away.
Okay. Very neat. I'm going to have to do that.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. All right. Emily Rose, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have a question. Do the horses drink water from the ocean, or are they acclimated to salt water?
That's a really good question. I get asked that a lot. So they don't drink salt water. They are acclimated to probably higher levels of sodium in their diet overall than most normal domestic horses would be. We've never really studied it. I was actually talking about this with somebody the other day, because you'll hear people say a lot of times that they look bloated because they intake a lot more sodium, which might be the case, but I don't know that anyone's ever actually done a scientific study. So that's kind of next on my list. If anyone is interested in doing that, give me a call because I'd be curious too. But no, they do not drink the ocean water. They will go out into the ocean to cool off and get away from the bugs, and they'll also fight with each other out there because it kind of slows them down a little bit. But there's actually a lot of fresh water in their habitat. There's about 7,600 acres of land, and you have everything from the beach to maritime forest. You've got some flat areas that pretty much look like pasture land with grass on them. The Currituck Sound is mostly fresh water at this point. It was closed up during a hurricane in the 19th century. And so that water they can drink. And then there's also man-made canals in the area as well that has fresh water in them. So that's where they get their water from.
Okay. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy. Yeah. Well, what about their diet? What do they eat out there?
They are the hardiest little animals that I have ever been around in my life. It's one of the hardest things about keeping these horses in captivity is feeding them or not feeding them. It is very, very easy to overfeed them because they're in the wild. They're not used to having the kind of calories that hay and our pasture grass has. And so we have to be really careful. We test our hay and we've got horses that are on very strict diets because they tend to get overweight very quickly. But in the wild, they're seasonal grazers, so they eat what's available to them at the time. This time of year, the sea oats are blooming, and so you'll see them on the dunes, and they eat the top of the sea oats off. So you actually don't see a lot of damage from the horses because they're not ripping grass out by the roots. They're eating the top of the dune grass. There's quite a bit of forage that grows back there, especially this time of year. You'll see grass and things like that. In the wintertime, we really don't have very harsh winters here. So it's not like they're dealing with everything under snow for 4 months of the year or anything like that, but it will die off. And so you'll see them eating all kinds of like brush and forage and, sticker bushes and poison ivy and all kinds of stuff like that. They'll eat acorns. We had some researchers from NC State were here years ago and did a study on stomach contents and found a really, really, really high level of acorns in their stomachs, which is not normal for a horse, but it doesn't, they've adapted to it. In the fall, they like persimmons. We have persimmon trees that grow naturally here. And so you'll see the horses, shaking the branches of the persimmon trees to get the right persimmons off of them. So, that's the one thing that they're really, really good at is taking care of themselves is what I tell people. You very rarely see a thin horse that's thin because it can't feed itself, can't find food.
Right. Wow.
Well, do you guys still have that program where you could pay to feed them for a day, give them hay, or is that kind of an old program?
Yeah, we do. And that's over here at our rescue farm. Yeah, we have a hay for a day program where people can donate certain levels to feed one of the horses for a day, and that's one of the things that we do here at the farm is try to replicate their life in the wild as much as we possibly can. I mean, it's not, entirely possible because they're on a farm in pastures, but, we try to keep hay in front of them 24 hours a day. So that, mimics grazing and they get slow feeder nets on them and that kind of thing. So yeah, hay costs and, just pretty much like anybody else who has horses right now, our hay costs are really starting to go through the roof a little bit. So that's a great way people can help the horses at the rescue farm for sure.
Okay.
And they can find that on your website too, the Hay for a Day program?
They sure can. Yeah, there's a tab that says support the horses. And if they click on that, it'll be listed there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can also sponsor one of the rescue horses. We've got some of the horses are featured on the website where they can sponsor one of the horses as well. So that's also a big help.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you sponsor a horse, what does that look like? You sponsor the horse for the day too, or is it, for the year?
It's a year, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so there's different levels that they can choose, and you'll get a picture of your horse and some background information about the horse. And then we send out updates, quarterly, usually updates. So.
Amazing. Well, are there any other questions from the audience who are watching? Anything else you want to know? There is one comment from Yonder Wave Farm that you guys have the best volunteers ever. So that is high praise.
We do. Thank you for saying that. They definitely deserve to be recognized because it is, it's not an easy job and it's really not an easy job when you're doing it for free, so we are very, very grateful for our volunteers.
Yeah.
When there might be one more. So this one is related to kind of a recent news piece. So why do they choke on apples or carrots if they can eat acorns?
That's a great idea. So, the easiest answer to that is the acorns are natural to their diet, right? And so, they have adapted over the years to be able to eat them. It's naturally occurring in their environment. And so, it's one of those things where, if we want them to stay wild, we have to let them do wild things, whereas like as someone who's had domestic horses my whole life, when you see a horse crunching on acorns in the wild, it's kind of like, oh God, but that's what they do, and they, like I said, they know how to take care of themselves. Apples and carrots, though, are not a natural part of their diet. And so we have had, especially in the last couple years, some pretty terrible incidents with people feeding the horses. And what happens is people will go out and they'll buy a bag of apples, and especially the apples that come in the bags, they're small. They're not even as big as normal apples. And the horse, they'll offer them to the horse, and the horse eats it and doesn't chew it up. And so they'll swallow it and it lodges right in their throat. And so that's how we lost a yearling colt 2 years ago to that. He had an apple lodged in his throat. And then we also had to remove an older stallion last summer who had been fed probably an apple. We were able to get it passed before, we had to do anything more intensive than that. But it was apple shaped. And I always say he probably didn't eat a tennis ball. So I imagine it was an apple. And then it also, you have that, but then it also habituates them. And it gets them used to being fed. And then you end up with issues where horses are approaching people for food. They can get aggressive over that. It's just a really, really bad situation overall for when people feed them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we have another question that asks about your adoption program.
Yep. Yeah. So we do still have an adoption program. Absolutely. If you go on our website, you can find we have a pre-adoption form that you fill out, and that gets sent to me, and then we'll review it and, reach out and see exactly what you're looking for, what your goal is for one of these horses and everything. And then depending on, the horses that we have available, something may match up or may not. We like for people to be able to come and work with them for a bit before we adopt them out, just because you have your eye set on a certain horse doesn't mean that it's going to be a good fit at all. And so we really like to work with people and make sure that, we're setting everybody up for success. So, but the first step would be to go on the website and find that pre-adoption form and get that sent in.
When the last one that we have so far is, will you ever do the Mustang reunion again?
Yeah, that would be so fun. I would love to do that. That would be a lot of fun if we could make that happen again someday soon.
What is that? What's the Mustang reunion?
So that was it was probably about a year or two before I actually started with the fund. They invited everyone who had adopted banker horses over the years to come to the farm and kind of have a little reunion and a little show and some demonstrations and things like that. So yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun.
That does sound fun.
Mm-hmm.
When it sounds like you guys have a ton of opportunities for kind of people visiting and people who want to volunteer. So we're definitely excited to work more with you guys. And both of us, Charlene and I are going on vacations, and it's definitely a place that we consider visiting. So if you're listening to this via podcast, their website is Corolla, so Corolla, wildhorses.com. Are there any more questions from the audience? I think I see one more, which is, are you still collecting DNA for the adopted horses?
Yeah, we are. If you have a banker horse that you would like to send us hair, we will send it off to Texas A&M and put it in with the rest of them. So, if you can just mail it to us, our mailing address is on the website too, and just put it in the mail and make sure you write down what horse it is so we know who we're testing, and we will add them to the study for sure. I mean, our goal is to get every single horse that we know of DNA tested. So yeah, if we haven't reached out to you yet, reach out to us.
Mm-hmm. Good thinking. So for your DNA testing, are you trying to reconstruct pedigrees? Is that what you're doing with it, or something else?
Somewhat, kind of both. We definitely, it is in our long-term management plan to develop an ancestry chart for all of these horses. And so we are working on that and trying to determine relationships and things like that. And then again, there's also just as we talked about earlier, the genetic disease kind of side of things and the genetic diversity and the genetic health too. So both of those things. Mm-hmm.
There are some old DNA studies, right, where folks were looking at who are these horses?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, pretty much from like the beginning of when anybody was really thinking about the horses in those terms, from the late 80s into the 90s, there have been people associated with the fund who have thought that, have recognized the need for that and how important it is. And so, it was kind of when, like I said, when the pandemic started a couple years ago, we started going through some old files, anything else to do, and started reading over some of this work and thought, a lot of this work has been started, and we need to take it and run with it. People have put a lot of effort into this already. And so let's, see where we are and keep going with it. And so that's kind of how that got started. And we've been able to, we have one group of horses here at the farm that were isolated on an island since 1999. And so they kind of became our sort of control group, because we had them here and we sort of knew where they came from, because there had not been a lot of horses introduced to that island over the years. And so by taking their DNA and then also a lot of this anecdotal information and the historical files and notes from previous people and everything, we've been able to reconstruct some of that ancestry that goes really back to the 70s at this point, which is really cool, and connects them to a lot of the horses that people knew in the 90s. We had some pretty iconic horses back then that, one of them sadly got hit by a car, and it was sort of the springboard for the formation of the fund and the installation of the horse fence and everything. And, and so through this DNA work, we now can say that we've got horses on this farm right now that, his granddaughters and great granddaughters. And so, it scientifically, it helps us a lot, but it also just kind of gives you another sort of emotional connection to these horses, and I think that's going to help save them too. The people that say, oh, I remember Star, I remember when he got hit by a car, and then they can come here and we can say, well, this is Moxie. She lived with him, she knew him, and this is his granddaughter, Luna, and that really, it makes it really personal for people, and it makes the horses kind of individuals and not kind of this like arbitrary sort of blob of horses. It makes it real for people.
Wow, that's really neat.
Yeah,
very exciting.
It is.
Well, and we have a question about the height of banker horses. How tall usually are they?
So we see anywhere from about 12 hands is pretty small, up to 14 hands. So at the farm here, it's kind of hard to measure the wild horses, but based on what we have at the farm, we have a 3.5-year-old colt who is measuring about 14 hands at his butt right now. So he's still kind of lopsided. But he was brought in when he was a yearling and he's been fed. And so, does that make a difference? Maybe a little bit, but standard height is usually around 13.2. That's about normal for one of these guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, then we have a good question about the information that rental homes have. So do you provide literature for rental homes near that area for how to interact?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do. So on our website, there is a section called the Community Wild Horse Toolkit. And so within that, there's a lot of resources for really anyone who wants to use them. Most of them are free. We do charge. There's some metal signs and things like that people can order. But a lot of it is just free. There are flyers and informational videos and things like that. And so we have reached out to rental companies. We have a realtor association here on the Outer Banks too, and made sure that they are all aware that information is available. We've given out probably hundreds of fridge magnets. Everybody always likes fridge magnets. And so we try to make sure that they have those. We have yard signs and other types of signage that's available to homeowners that we will, even take to their house. A lot of times I'll get a message from a homeowner that says, I'm not here right now, but could you put a sign at my house and we'll go do it for them. So, there's lots of resources if people want to use them.
Yeah, that's great.
Amazing. I think that wraps up most of the questions that we've had for today, unless there are any more. But thank you so much for coming and speaking with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. We really appreciate it. And I just point out that, your work is pretty amazing. And you don't do it all by yourself. So for your shameless plug, what would you like to say to folks about the fund or about about
About
it.
the fun. Yeah, like you said, I don't do it by myself. We are a very, very small organization. And every single person who is involved with the Wild Horse Fund does it because they love the horses.
Yeah.
We are all here because of the horses. And, so I don't think that anyone who's ever talked to us or really interacted with us would doubt that. But I can say that every single person associated with the horse is just truly in it for the horses. And it's a really wonderful group of people in our community too. We are the organization, and we kind of keep things organized and running, but we could not do it without our community and without far and wide, not just the people who live here, but the people who vacation here and support us and are advocates for these horses. So we say all the time, it takes a village, and it sounds so corny and so trite, but it's so true. We can't do it alone. So we really appreciate everyone's support. We appreciate what you guys do for us, and just across the board. These horses are really special, and they touch a lot of lives and touch a lot of people. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you again, Meg. If folks out there want to learn any more about the Corolla horses in particular, or the colonial Spanish horses as a larger group, you can definitely check in on our website. They're the Horse of the Americas, I think the Spanish Mustang organization. They'll all have a lot of information about the other types, in addition to the Corolla, that are out there. And it's really neat to put together the history of, the early part of the settling of the U.S. by Europeans and others, and see that this all fits together. It's all people. It always was. And it's people, as Meg just said, that are all working together to keep these animals going forward. So thank you for all you do. Thank you, everyone who's out there listening. Remember that you can follow up with us. This will be posted on YouTube, and it will be available as a podcast. And you can also usually find the video after it's run on Facebook as well, in the videos section. So lots of ways to see this if you're just tuning in. And if any questions come in later, Meg will put you on them.
Yep, no problem. Always happy to talk about the horses.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.